I'd like to start tonight's meeting for the CBA tonight, August the 25th, within the 5:30 hour. This amendment. Please share
Okay.
What is that? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, sorry.
So this is amendment to the community benefits agreement ordinance. Tonight you have myself, Councilman Ron Brewer, Councilman at Large, Councilwoman Mary Brown, Councilwoman of the 3rd District, Cloris Lay, Councilman Cloris Lay, Councilman at Large, William Godwin, Councilman of the 1st District, Dwight Williams, Councilman of the 6th District, Cozy Weatherspoon, Councilman of the 2nd District, Councilwoman Ty Atkins of the 4th District, Linda Barnes Caldwell of the 5th District. Our attorney, Renza Williams, is also with us, and the city Caesar, Rodney Pohl, is also with us. I would like for every member of the CBA that's with us tonight, if you would just introduce yourself.
Carolyn McCready.
Melvin Evans Jr.
Vanessa Allen McLeod.
Emmett Mosley.
You have everyone? Okay.
I don't know. I can't. I'm on my phone. I can't tell who else is in.
Okay. So what we would do, I have Councilwoman Ty Atkins on. We never did receive our outline that we had asked for, but Councilwoman Ty Atkins have gotten us an outline together, and she would lead us through this process of the outline. Councilwoman Ty Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, may I say something?
Councilman Lay.
Okay, and this may affect to some extent the meeting. I listened very carefully to what Mr. Godwin has said, what Councilwoman Mary Brown also indicated, yourself, the mayor, Tammy Davis, and so forth. My first inclination with this ordinance, 9305, was to repeal it. After speaking with Mr. Godwin, I told him I would consider an amendment. I found this amendment to be a complete waste of my time. So to be clear as we go forward, on the 1st of September, I'm withdrawing the amendment and moving to repeal 9305. And the basis for this, I'm not sure, looking at what has taken place, that we can get anything through the mayor because he's already dumped the MOU. I did look up what would happen if we started all over again. And I think that was suggested in the council meeting to shift it where we would rewrite and take a look at this ordinance where we all could agree to something that would not require us attempting to override a veto. I think at this point, just practical politics would say we should go back in, take a look at 9305, slow it down, and anything in relationship to a project. Of course, we can make this ordinance retroactive. It's not a criminal. It's not a criminal law, and so that's basically, where I am. I will move to repeal it altogether, and that's where I was until Mr. Godwin asked me to consider an amendment, and that certainly has not worked at all. So that's it, Mr. Chairman. I basically, beyond that, I don't really have anything to add or subtract from this meeting.
Well, I feel like council has already, and I speak of Attorney Pohl has already weighed in from the administration standpoint on changes that they would like to see inside here. And I think we're just basically at the negotiation.
The mayor will join me on, I wouldn't have spoken like I did. The mayor will join me on the withdrawal of the amendment. It's crystal clear based upon his previous action that if he got rid of the MOU, I doubt very seriously, I'm not sure if we can get an amendment through the council because as I understand it, you're going to attempt to amend the amendment and maybe amend the amendment of the amendment. So I'm not sure to go anywhere. We certainly, in fairness to anyone, you can continue along this line. I was just simply trying to give you some practical politics. No, he's going to join in. I would not have made that statement because it was a joint amendment to 9305. So the administration will join in with me on that part.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Godwin.
thank you. So when it was first brought to my attention, Councilman Lay's amendment was limited to the body in terms of who would serve on the CBA committee. As we know, this took on a much larger scope when the administration began to add a whole host of changes. I think we were making good progress in terms of the resumes, in terms of who could sit on it. I know there was a variety of opinions, as there always is, but when this scope moved beyond who sat on the committee and got into the substance of the ordinance itself, I think it became far too complicated and far too drawn out. So I wanted to indicate that I absolutely do not support a repeal and will vote against a repeal. I think that, 4 of the members of this current body voted for it. I was not one of those 4, obviously, but I think that there are ways in which we can build upon the CBA and make it amenable to development, but also amenable to making sure that the local benefits are present.
Mr. President, just a minor correction, and certainly I think Mr. Godwin has the right to vote as he so chooses. I absolutely will not vote for any amendment to 9305, but presently there are only 3 members of the original 9 that are present to vote. That's the councilwoman of the 5th district, the 3rd district, and Council Brewer at large. I don't think anyone else would have been present for the vote. We have 5 new members on the council. So again, just based upon that, we have 5 new members and a mayor. It would seem to me that we have been elected for 4 years, that we certainly could make an input. I'm not saying that we don't come back with a 9305, whether we call it 9305 A, B, C, or D, but certainly it's where we have input from the people that currently will have to enforce it. There are things in 9305 that I didn't agree with whatsoever. I went in to try and just simply correct, because we got in this long extended argument about whether a 501c4 existed, who was on the corporation, and all of these things. I didn't know I would run into that when I agreed to attempt an amendment. But as I went into it, I guess they said the devil is in the detail. So again, and I realize I'm taking additional time. I just want to be clear, the amendment that is before you, there will be a motion to withdraw the amendment and a ordinance to repeal 9305. I'm not sure what we should do up to this point. I guess we could say, well, we'll go ahead as if this motion or ordinance to repeal is going to fail. I don't know how it stands, but I feel pretty good based upon just listening to people that it will pass, but don't have to now. I don't know that for sure. So I just simply thought it would be fair to at least tell you up front that I'm going back to what my original position was, my absolute original position. And I agree with Councilman Godwin, our president, that it is convoluted, this entire 9305, which means if we started over again, we could probably do a much better job than trying to do a rehab on 9305. We just do new construction and come up with a better ordinance that hopefully everybody, the executive as well as the legislative branch, could agree with, and we could go forward and do what we're required to do for the people of this community.
Well, Mr. Lay, I do understand your thoughts and what your decision is going to be, but I do believe we're at a point now where we can work on those issues, because I don't want to just take it as that's the gospel and that's what's going to happen at the next council meeting, that the repeal will go through and we automatically know that the votes are already there. I do understand that's your pleasure to do that, and you have every right to do that. And it's up to the body to decide on how it's going to happen. But right now we do have this before us, which we don't take any votes inside this meeting now. So there's no way else to determine tonight how that will happen, or if the majority of members are in favor.
I wasn't asking for a vote.
No,
I
do understand what
I was giving you information.
I'm not asking that.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, I'm not in favor of repealing it without something going in place of it, and that we know what it is. Because we can easily repeal something and nothing never happens. I believe it took them a long time to get to the point where they're at now. They acknowledge, well, we as council members have acknowledged there are flaws and troubles here. And I believe we're working right now to try and work through those things now through our committee. And we're taking our time to do it, because this has been back to committee several times to deal with it. And we're going to attempt to do it tonight also. Councilwoman Atkins?
Mr.
Yes.
President?
Yes.
I think
So-
Councilwoman Brown had a comment before we start.
Okay.
Yeah,
Councilwoman Brown?
my comment is I voted for it when we passed it last year, but I have since then had some questions. I do have some questions in terms of the tax benefits that, you know, they ensure that the residents have a seat at the table. When we talk about the residents, what are we supposed to do as council people? We represent the residents of the city. So, you know, I have some concerns about that. I have some concerns about how this CDC is going to affect all of the residents of the city. We've got residents in all of the districts of the city. When we get the money, how is the money going to be split? Is it going to be split in all the districts? I have some other questions myself. And I should
Mr.
have,
Chair,
go ahead.
no, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, may I answer that?
I'm sorry, no, go ahead.
Not yet. Okay.
Councilwoman Atkins.
Yes.
Can you proceed at this time?
Yeah, do you want me to share my screen, or do you want me just to, it might be too much, it's a lot of detail, or I could just run through the changes. If you all have the document that Attorney Pohl sent us on July 21st, which showed the markings, it's basically that, but I'm just gonna focus on those that actually had changes.
Okay. Whatever is best for you, if you can probably share the screen, it will help even
Okay.
better.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, you're up now.
All right, right now you should see an Excel sheet. That's a yes. We're good to go?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I'm gonna try to make it as big as I can. So what I did was, like I said, took the document that Attorney Pohl sent us on the 21st of July, I believe. He sent us two documents. The first one was the amendment to, so the proposed amendment CPO 2020-39 that had the trackings. And so from that document, there was about 32 different items, I should say, that we should probably look at. Starting with definitions. I know in previous conversations, we've only focused on section 2 and portions of section 4, but it is important that we as a council understand all of the changes that have been proposed in that amendment, starting with the definitions, because of course that sets the tone in terms of how you interpret the whole ordinance. So the first one, the section is in column A right here. So as we move down the line, if you look in the first column, you'll always see what section this information is referenced in. And so the first change was related to the CBA applicable development. Column D shows the original language. So in the original ordinance, it kind of had a definition of what the city issue benefit was. The change that was proposed, and I believe this was the administrative change, was to just add a threshold. So the CBA applicant,
Everyone else to mute your phone. 484-587. I'm gonna have you to be muted.
I think we're good. Okay. So this part is important, is just identifying a threshold that relates to what is considered an applicable development. So now states that the applicable development should be a project in the city that receives a city-issued tax abatement benefit and other benefits as explained in this ordinance as defined by the CCBA in excess of $1 million. And previous to that, there was no threshold. So for example, the Broadway Lofts development, per this change, will not qualify for a CBA because that benefit from a tax abatement standpoint was only about $664,000. So, Mr. Chair, do you want me to run through them all, or do you want to have dialogue for some of them so we can?
I would say let's go step by step and have a dialogue with them.
Okay. So do we have any commentary related to this? We want to get input from the committee, council members.
Let's run through with council members at this time. When we come back, I want to make sure the council members understand where we're going, and then we come back to the CBA committee.
Okay. Okay. So the next proposed change, again, under section 1 definitions, it was just an addition. The previous language just stated what the city of Gary was defined as. The amendment added the redevelopment commission to be a part of the definition of the city of Gary. I'm gonna roll through them and you stop me if there's any council member that has questions or discussion. The next one, again, is the definition in section 1. This was a change as it relates to the definition of community benefits. Previous language just stated that the community benefits shall be not limited to, but schools, parks, healthcare, affordable, mixed income housing. It spoke to the minority designation, African-American, minority female-owned businesses, access to supplier contracts, and environmental protection from industrial projects. The change in the language states that the benefit shall mean a benefit provided or created on behalf of the city of Gary or its citizens by a developer in exchange for a city-issued benefit, which could include, but is not limited to, donations and or improvements or creation, maintenance of, and then it went into the original language, defining what it could be, parks, schools, etc. This last sentence is key. There was an addition that stated that this does not include state, federal funds that the city of Gary distributes as a pass-through. So again, for example, the Broadway Lofts project did include home funds. I'm not sure if it was CDBG funds, but it definitely included home funds. So this will not be a part of the community benefits roll-up. Only tax abatement. And again, just in column B, I just wrote what this information is stating. Any questions? All right. So for this next change, it was under the definition of compliance officer. Again, we just removed the specifics that a compliance officer needed to be an independent contractor. So in the original ordinance, it stated that the compliance officer shall mean the independent contractor who focuses on monitoring the workforce agreement, etc. So the change states that the compliant officer shall mean the person or company in charge with monitoring workforce agreements. So I took this to mean, for example, how I think the administration made reference to Tammy Davis, who was on our last call, being somewhat associated with compliance. So this will not be an independent contractor if in fact she was given that task. It will be someone a part of the administration. Any questions?
And in that part there, I know that there are funds are definitely spelled out that it will pay for a compliance officer. So if Tammy Davis is working for the Secretary District of Compliance, how does the fund from the CBA cover That's a question that I have. Because basically, you're giving funds to cover a compliance officer, but the city's already put it on there, but have already paid the CDA those dollars for a compliance officer. Mr. Poe, do you have any response to that? I believe Councilman Godwin is muted. Can the host make sure that he's unmuted? Councilman Godwin?
Okay. No, I was just saying, is it our intention to mute everyone? Because at some point, people are going to have questions, whether it's us or the committee. I'm not sure if anyone else has been muted where they can't unmute themselves. I think Councilwoman Brown is also muted.
I
So
want
we need
everyone to be able to mute themselves. I didn't expect for the host to mute everybody.
Yeah, well, none of us can. I wasn't able to unmute, and I don't think Councilwoman Brown is able to unmute.
Yeah. It was a 484 number that was keeping a lot of the noise up.
Okay, now she's unmuted.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I was just
Okay.
saying people couldn't ask questions if, you know.
Right.
Right. Now, I have a question about the compliance officer. You're
Okay.
saying it shall mean the person or company charged with monitoring workforce agreements? I need to understand that.
Yes, that's a proposed change that the administration has put in. So that's what I'm asking Mr. Poe to weigh in on that session there.
So, Councilman Godwin was right. I couldn't unmute myself. So I wanted to make sure all the council members had a chance to speak before the administration obviously jumped in. But I would, point out just as an initial matter that Councilman Lay is right. The administration's position is that the council, this administration, and then the community groups should essentially try to work on something that we all have our hands on from the beginning. I think we are trying to piecemeal this at this point. And on behalf of the administration, I would proffer that the administration does agree with Councilman Lay. As it pertains to the question at hand, in this particular instance where we're talking about the compliance officer, you're going to have large projects that are just going to meet the threshold, and you're going to have or you're going to have small projects that just meet the threshold. You're going to have large, very, very large projects that, Ms. Davis would not be able to assist on. So in a situation like that, where you have somebody that, has to be hired out, that was what the intent was in changing that definition to make sure that it could both apply to somebody like Ms. Davis, who's a person that's in charge of the compliance, or it would be, in an instance where it's like, okay, well, Ms. Davis isn't going to be able to constantly keep up with, say that you had a large steel mill, a brand new steel mill, or you had a large, I should say, like a manufacturing plant that goes in, a large Amazon or something along those lines, where it's just, her capabilities are just going to be too much. Then in that instance, then yeah, they're going to have to pay for their own independent compliance officer. But ultimately, what we were trying to do was ensure that, we weren't just piling on, automatically requiring somebody to go out and hire something for like a small project that we would be able to handle or at least assist with in-house. So. And if they wanted to hire Miss Davis independently, that would also be, something that they could do outside of her employment with the city of Gary if it was something smaller. But I mean, essentially, we wanted to ensure that, however that was read, that it was general enough that it could encompass more than just having to go out and hire basically an independent employee.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Brown?
My question and concern is this. The council has a responsibility in terms of compliance. Even though we do have Tammy Davis currently, the council has the ability to go out, and if we need to hire somebody, we could do that. But we have a responsibility because we are the persons who granted the abatement. So if the company is not complying with the abatement as we issued it, then we have every right to withdraw the abatement or do whatever it is that we choose. But the council has some responsibility in terms of compliance.
Okay. Any other questions, council members? Councilwoman Atkins?
Not a question, but just to Councilwoman Brown's point, I just wanted to just let the council know. There is a section in section 6 that kind of speaks to how the council will work with the compliance officer. It's just saying that we should be provided a report in a respective time period that will allow us, I guess, the opportunity to review the compliance that the developer is holding to the CBA. And so I guess that's a sense in what we can use as a tool to make sure that they are, to Councilwoman Brown's point, that they are adhering to, you know, whatever the requirements were, if there is a need for us to remove it or not. So that's in place as well, but it's like in another section.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna keep it moving. I don't think you all can't see my screen anymore, can you? No. Okay.
Coming back now.
All right. Are we up?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the next portion, developer, again, just giving some more meat in terms of what developer should be mean. And it just says, as we move through the ordinance, developer and development shall be used interchangeably. The next one was just stating that an actual development is an applicable city issue benefit, which was defined early on in the ordinance as well. The city issue benefit was defined. Let's see. The enforcement committee. So this one had some additional information. So again, this is still definition. This is not section 2, but it related to the definition of what the enforcement committee was. It stated that the previous ordinance passed that the enforcement committee is comprised of, corporation counsel, representatives from the Department of Redevelopment and Planning, Law Department, and then the CGCBA. The amendment states that it should be one representative from the Redevelopment Department under the administration, led by the city's corporation counsel, and 5 members of the CCBA. Of the 5 members, 3 members shall be common council appointments and 2 shall be mayoral appointments. So I know that, does the council have any feedback related to that? Again, this is just the enforcement committee, not the CCBA committee. Okay, we'll keep it moving. In the original ordinance, there was definitions related to party, People's Advisory Council, as well as the planning director. As we move through the ordinance, the planning director was actually changed to director in some of the terms. And so in the amendment, those were removed. So party, People Advisory Council, and planning director was actually removed because it is not referenced in the amendment. No questions? Okay. Last definition, workforce development. I think the only change in the amendment was related to how the definement of low-income neighborhoods, where would that come from? And so the amendment stated that it will be defined as by the U.S. Census. Okay. I have a question related to this section. So as defined by the U.S. Census, so does that mean that it will be based on a certain income level? And what is that income level? Is it just lower than, do we know
Yeah.
that?
Yes, so I think in us using, if I can, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
in us using, and one thing that I forgot to mention is an initial comment as well. This is a fantastic overview, Councilwoman Atkins. I started putting something together, but it was definitely not as good as this. So I do thank you, because this is very fantastic. So yeah, definitely owe you one on this. I did. I mean, like I stated, I did start on this, and this is organized much better than mine was. But as far as to the Councilwoman's question, we wanted to include that because with the U.S. Census defines low-income neighborhoods, that is, based upon, but median, the median income for the median annual income, what the median housing is, median cost of housing there, those factors. As stated there, it just was something that was just so, as we had stated, one of our major reasons in even doing this amendment was to ensure that there was some things that were a little bit more clarified or defined than just, residents of low income neighborhoods. I mean, that on its own what does that necessarily mean? So figuring we give it some sort of reference, and something that's, applied, generally across the United States, we figured, okay, that would be a lot bit better. And I'm sorry, is anybody else getting that feedback, or is it just me?
Yeah, I don't get any feedback.
Okay, I was getting this really bad feedback. I apologize. But ultimately, yeah, we wanted something that just had some sort of reference.
Okay, I got it. So less than median income level based on census.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. The famous section 2. All right. So in section 2 spoke to the Commission on Community Benefits Agreements. So this is the actual group that will be associated with it. And what I did was I just put that whole section into one. And so I know we'll probably have to break it down. So again, previously this was the definition that was stated there under section 2. And the amendment actually proposed structure as it related to the CCBA. So for those changes, it consists of 8 members selected by the council, as well as 3 members selected by the mayor. The president of the CCBA shall be appointed by the Common Council. The vice president shall be appointed by the mayor of the city. The term for each member is 4 years, and they will be staggered in terms of the commissions. It says that the Common Council shall designate 4 commissioners, and the mayor shall designate 1 to serve 2-year inaugural terms. There will be no limit for the number of terms a commissioner can serve. Each commissioner shall serve and be replaced at the leisure of the authority that appointed the commissioner, so either the council or the mayor. The CCBA shall meet at the request of the redevelopment department as it pertains to agreements applicable to this ordinance, or at the request of the Gary Common Council or any designated Common Council committee for any other reasons pertaining to this ordinance. I'm gonna pause there.
So, Councilwoman, the change that I had referenced earlier on was the number of committee members, and I suggested that the entire committee be seated on this board. And the reason why I stated that, because this is not a group that was put together by the administration per se or the city council. It was something that was put together by residents, and that was brought to the mayor and was brought to the council for passage at the time. So that's my reason for having the entire committee to be seated. I know it was asked about resumes being submitted, and I'm not against that. And having Gary residents to sit there, I'm not against that. I think they should. But I think the entire committee needs to be set there by this council.
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Godwin?
I'll yield to Councilwoman Barnes Caldwell. I think she was about to speak.
Councilwoman Caldwell, I'm only
Oh,
saying.
I just wanted to know how many, I'm sorry.
Be wrong.
Oh, how many, how many members are on their board?
I'm going to do it for the record. Ms. McCready, if you will unmute and you will give us an accurate number of the committee for the record.
Right now, 16. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say I also agreed with this. Look, I don't work for the administration. I represent people in the city. I don't carry anybody's water but the folks who elected me. And so I certainly hope that we're able to find a way to honor the work that this committee has done that has representation throughout the city and all the districts. And I agree that it is a disgrace to in any way diminish the work, the background, the representation, the experience, the contribution, the value that each of these members brings to this task. And I wholeheartedly support incorporating them into however the membership within this body is constituted.
Is there any other comments or questions by any other council members for section 2?
I have a question just for thought. So I also agree. I mean, I don't want to diminish any work that this group has done. And I understand, again, the nature, the intent of it, and support that wholeheartedly. But I wonder in terms of a continuity plan. So there's no way in the amendment that speaks to if we did incorporate the 16 members, do we then say that the term is also 4 years from the statement or the execution of the amendment? And then how do we rotate additional members?
Well, I believe we couldn't keep it at 16. We would have to go with an odd number at that point.
Or
yes, so that's why I brought the number 17 up before. I would add that it would be a number at 17, and we would seat the current board, and that one extra person, however the body would like to do that, we're putting that additional person on, we can come to that agreement also. But I believe you're speaking as far as the terms, the 4-year terms there. I think right out you will have to see, you would have to stagger the term. I mean, you have to take at least half at 4-year terms and another half probably at a 2-year term. Now, how we do that, I think we would probably just do a lottery. That's my suggestion, doing a lottery on the terms at this point.
Mr. Chair, that's a lot of people for a board, and 4 years is a long time for that many people. So my suggestion is 2 years, especially if you're going to be that many people. Just my opinion.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I may say, yes, there are 16 people on our board, but there are several people who have already said that they could not commit to being on the board. So I don't have a really hard number of who can actually commit.
When you say they commit being on the board, can you explain that?
Oh, well, if our entire CBA committee were to become the commissioners, there are some people who are on our CBA committee who cannot commit to being commissioners.
So
that's what I'm saying.
So basically, we can just go ahead and set the number then, in other words. Because I
yeah.
Know. Okay.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be 16 because there are several people and maybe others. I didn't hear from everyone. I contacted the committee and asked people on the committee if they could become commissioners, And some people, most people responded yes, some people didn't respond at all, and a couple of people said they could not commit to that.
Well, I would take that request back then from being a 17-member board, and I would reduce it down to a 9-member board.
That might be more doable. Mm-hmm.
I would agree. This is Dr. McLeod. I definitely agree with you, Mr. Chair, because I do know that there were a few, about 3 or 4, that said they couldn't serve for various reasons, personal and professional. So thank you for recommending that number to be 9. That's doable.
Well, if Mr. Chair, if I may, from the administration standpoint, one of the things that we really, we'd have to take a really hard look at is, I sit on the BZA, I sit on the Planning Commission. I don't sit on those boards, but I represent them at, in those hearings. And a lot of times we have a lot of people from the, a lot of applicants for various projects, variances, special uses that are very upset when we don't have a quorum. And this is only, in certain instances, it's only 5 members. I mean, we would need, to have some certainty that, 9 is still a lot. And so we would need some certainty. If this amendment does go through and it's not something that we could work out otherwise, we can't hold up projects based on the fact that we can't put a quorum together, because I mean, like most developments, these are timeline projects, and to get caught up, because we can't get a quorum for, a meeting or consecutive meetings, that's a big problem for us. So, I mean, I would like to know, what is doable is good, but we want to make sure that if we're setting a board, that it's going to be something that doesn't also, delay projects because of quorum issues.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Attorney.
I agree with Mr. Thank you. I agree with Mr. Pohl's point, because I've tried to go to some meetings and wasted time when quorums were not met. Again, I'm not an expert in municipal law, but there is a way in which we can define what a quorum is, right? That might be more than a simple majority. Is that possible?
Well, I believe a quorum will be 5.
But I'm saying, does it have to be a simple majority?
Oh, okay.
Are we bound by, I mean, what are the parameters? I mean, this is something we're creating. And so, it's not talking about the city council or the redevelopment commission or something like that. So I don't know if there's any statutory requirements in terms of what a quorum is.
Mr. Chair.
Attorney Williams.
Yeah, if they're going to be governed by any reparable rules of governing, which would, I would imagine, Robert Rules of Order, it would require a majority of the body. I don't know of any other authority to constitute a quorum. So if they're going to have 9, 5 would have to be a minimum of constituting a quorum.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure. So this body is going to be governed by Robert's Rules of Order.
I don't know. I don't speak for the body, but if they're going to have any authority, I don't know of any other governing authority unless they adopt their own, which they can do whatever they want. They seem to be their own organization. So they can adopt their own rules. I would suggest, though, because it's going to be reflective of how governmental funds are going to be expended, that I would suggest that they adopt Robert Rules of Order.
This is Dr. McLeod. I agree 100%. That's what the Urban League Board goes by, Robert Rules of Order. And in our bylaws, we've set a 33% point on the terms of a quorum. So I agree with us using Robert Rules of Order. Thank you so much for that recommendation. That's a good one.
And so, Mr. Chair,
yes.
I think the concern that Mr. Pohl raised, which I share, is whether or not we feel that we can consistently have at least 5 people present at such meetings in a way to not, create a conflict for the movement of progress on development. that's an open concern, and I guess if we find that there's a problem, we can always amend the amendment and down the road.
Yes. I'm comfortable with amending the amendment if we have to. We see that there is a constant problem with getting a quorum together, that we come back and revisit this like we would do any other ordinance. Is there any other questions about section 2?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So again, as it relates to, I guess, like the authority over the organization, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Sorry, y'all, my screen keeps going away. So are we suggesting that there will be a commission developed under the council where this group will be housed? I'm thinking long-term, not like current state, right? And then as we define how the stagger will happen, do we still want those appointments going forward to come from the council? Do we want a mix of the administration and the council? I think we should talk about that as well.
Good question. I know at this point, I do want everyone seated at the table, and I'm not against in the future if we will allow for a certain percent to come from the administration going forward. Because at the end of the day, the mayor, you do need the mayor's support for this to happen.
Mr. Chair, that is a good idea. We want to be inclusive on anything that's going to support the development and the, should I say, collaboration of our community. So definitely we want to have the administration identify or appoint their representation so that we can continue to work together on the effort. So I welcome that.
So at this point, are we suggesting that we make those now? Because I'm fine with doing a, what's that, a six council, 3 from the administration at this time? So that would be my motion then. To have 6 come from the council and 3 appointed from the administration. But we want to make sure we have a quorum, and you need input from the administration on these projects.
Someone took me out.
Councilman Williams, you there?
I can't see you guys anymore.
We see you.
Yeah, all right. Can you repeat yourself, Chair? Mr. Chair?
I was saying that I'm in favor with having 6 members appointed from the city council and 3 members appointed from the administration to give input on these projects. So that would be my amendment to add to this.
Sounds good to me.
Yes. Anyone else? Council members? Councilwoman Atkins?
That's clear. And then structure of the group as well. As the amendment states, president appointed by the council, vice president appointed by the mayor, or do we want, what is the thoughts related to that? I think structure is very important. So I don't want us to pass over each element related to structure, each element related to how the council has any oversight, if any, related to this group. We have to be very clear about that.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Attorney Williams.
If the body is going to adopt Robert Rules of Order, then the body itself would determine who the chair and vice chair would be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Attorney Williams, do we need to state that this body will govern under Robert's Rules of Order into the ordinance? Or no? Or is that understood? I'm asking since it's like a separate.
No, I understand. I'm still a little confused about this. If the council is dictating who will serve, then absolutely. The council can put in the ordinance that Robert Rules of Order shall govern the organization. If that language is in there, then the discussion would be centered around, they would be governed under Robert Rules of Order. There would need not be any more discussion. So yes, I would say that that should be put in the ordinance, and by Robert Rules of Order, then the organization itself would choose its officers.
Okay.
Next.
I was just asking. All right. All right, we're gonna move on to section 3. All right, so section 3, I guess, was a newly added section to the amendment. It references the community benefits agreement applicability. And so in the original ordinance, there was no section that spoke to this, but it states that the CBA shall be required for all CBA applicable developments within the city that receives a tax abatement, combined with other benefits described below from the city of Gary. The ordinance shall not be applicable to any development receiving a total value of benefit less than $1 million. Said non-applicable developments are still subject to the imposed fee under the Indiana Code 6-1.1-12.2-14, which speaks to tax abatements and ERAs. So again, this is just defining when is the CBA even applicable, right?
Right.
I have a question about that, and maybe Mr. Pohl can help me. Mr. Pohl, are you there?
I am.
Okay. So with what Councilwoman Atkins just read, with this, if this had been the ordinance, would this have applied to Broadway Lofts?
I don't think it would have applied to Broadway Lofts. It's a little tough to say as far as you know, the assessments haven't fully been done on this yet, on Broadway Lofts yet. But I think, you know, you would essentially do your projections based on what the assessment states, what the value is, and then how that applies going forward. I don't think Broadway Lofts received, I don't think the value of the land, you know, was very much as well. And I don't even actually sure that they even got land to begin with. I think they may have gotten that from the GHA. I cannot recall, so off the top of my head. But I mean, as far as just based on the tax abatement, I don't think it would have met that $1 million burden or the $1 million threshold.
Oh, right.
Councilwoman Barnes Caldwell.
I'm sorry.
Because what I guess we know that the benefit, I believe, is around $700,000 that you all voted for Broadway Lofts to receive last week. And so it concerns me that, you know, that wouldn't have even, if we had done this, right, it would have not even included Broadway Lofts. And I think that's a point that we should not lose sight of with these changes that were made. And also it's concerning that if we put in something like this, you know, and we don't always know whether or to what extent it's what the assessed value is. It seems premature. I think that either should be stricken or it's too high, I think. Given the assessed valuation of property in our city, this is not, you know, Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. So you're going to exempt a lot of projects. And so I think we have to be very careful with that. That's all.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond just briefly, yes. I think with any development, you know, one of the major objectives is, you know, making sure you're somewhat outcome determinative. I think you have to have a threshold. I think developers, if they are, you know, particularly if they start to see things being applied unevenly, or if they see, you know, certain, you know, if they have not a real good idea as to what's going to apply and what's not going to, they may not even take interest if they think, you know, it's going to apply for a very, very small value just because of the bureaucracy that goes into it. So I do think, you know, if the amendment passes, that there should be some sort of threshold there to, you know, really kind of give developers an idea as to even what they're getting into, so they, you know, are you know, they're even interested in working with the city to begin with.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I absolutely agree with Mr. Pohl. I just think that one is too high. And I'm concerned that we were having these discussions using Broadway lofts as sort of our test for this ordinance, and things were being inserted that would have exempted them.
Mr. Chair,
Councilwoman Atkins?
this is just a comment. I think in these situations, we should defer to the subject matter experts, right, who are the redevelopment director and possibly the planning director. So, I mean, I'm not sure, I'm just thinking out loud. I would want to know, for us to get a better picture in terms of what would be an appropriate threshold, on average, what is the amount of tax abatements that we usually approve or usually come into in front of the council for approval? You know, what is the trends in the past, so that we can see from that what will be the median or what will be the average that we can even say will be appropriate going forward. Because $1 million, how often have you all in the past, myself and, you know, Councilman Godwin are new on the council, but in the past, how often have you approved $1 million or more tax abatement?
Right. And I couldn't tell you with Etzel Manufacturing how much theirs was. TMB2, the trust facility that's on 20, and the latest one to get did, it was a lot still. I couldn't tell you where the threshold is at on there. So I think that's a good question for planning and redevelopment. Where should that threshold be at?
And Mr. Chair,
yes,
we had asked about this back in early July. In terms of looking at, say, the last 3 to 5 major developments, what were the numbers, how much was the tax abatement? So we would have a mode of comparison, and we would understand, you know, what the different numbers would have, how those entities would have been implicated by this ordinance had it been in place. So I think we need to revisit that. I'm not sure whether Mr. Bittner is on the call or not, but we definitely want to have some knowledge of what would or would not have applied.
Any other questions on that section there with the threshold? Okay, Councilwoman Atkins.
All right, so section 4, which kind of speaks to some of what we just talked about. So section 4, there was a portion or a term that spoke about reinvestment. The original language stated any development that received a city issued benefit to invest 15% of the total value of that benefit in community benefits as defined in the ordinance or as agreed to in writing by a representative of the city of Gary and by the CGCBA. It also stated land transfer valuation, any transfer of any property to the developer from the city of Gary that will be valued by independent appraisal for purposes of determining the applicable benefit. This is crossed out because this portion, I think verbatim was not included in the amendment, but there is a section that speaks about land transfer, but not really the valuation of land. So the amendment says that any applicable CBA that receives the benefit, a city issued benefit, and this is key, agrees to invest up to 15%. The initial stated to invest a total of 15%. This is saying up to 15% of the total value of that benefit in community benefits as described in this ordinance or agreed to in writing by a representative of the city and the CCBA. Again, this is key, minus any amount agreed to as part of the imposed fee per Indiana Code 6-1.1-12.1-14, which I think is section 14 that we spoke about in the declaratory resolution for the ERA. So then again, this additional information was added under reinvestment from the amendment. The total value of benefit, is defined as what is received by development shall consist the sum of the following: the reduction in the value of land transferred as reported by the redevelopment department, total tax abatement value over the life of the abatement as reported by the redevelopment department, total value of grants received by the development on behalf of the city of Gary, any other benefit received and enjoyed solely by the development of the city of Gary that can be valued by a professional metric on behalf of the CCBA. Any questions by council members?
So basically, I'm trying to see how do you get to the number. I see, but I guess there's a lot of math that needs to take place there from the redevelopment department before you can see exactly what the CBA will be getting. I'm definitely glad that this session there's a change here, because I wouldn't want to see a developer coming in faith with 30% coming right in off the door to do business with the city of Gary. I do believe it's a session that we have to pay close attention to right here.
Yep.
Right. And so this will be the community benefit or the reinvestment will be if we do the imposed fee. So it will be that amount minus. So the imposed fee minus up to 15% if there's anything left over. And I don't know, one thing that I didn't understand was the up to 15%, like where does that appointment come from? You know, like at what how do we know what percentage will apply if applicable?
So, Mr. Chair, if I could,
Yes.
what including the up to 15%, what the intention was is to ensure that there was some flexibility with both the CBA and the council. I mean, if you leave it at 15%, it's always 15% no matter what. And this provides, you know, if there's a specific development that has, you know, in and of itself, it's a community benefit. But, if, you know, and the council wants to take that, the discretion, or the CBA wants to take, you know, exercise discretion and not automatically imposing 15%, it gives them that flexibility to do so. In addition, the explanation underneath that section where it basically breaks it down as the sum of either the tax abatement, the land transfer, you know, or anything else that could be, you know, measured by an actual professional metric. What that does is it gives, you know, again, some clarity to both the CBA and the developers as to what numbers are actually going into that. Because as written, it just states, you know, the value of the total value of the benefit, which wasn't really defined to begin with. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody understood what, you know, what that meant, what the, you know, what that calculation would be and how that was actually going to be totaled.
Any council person?
Then the language is just changed to up to 15%.
Correct. And then we also included the minus any amount as agreed to as part of the imposed fee.
So the administration is, they're okay with that language, then, correct?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what we proposed.
Any other question by any council members? Okay, moving on to the next section.
Just one quick question. Should there be a minimum? Because 0.1 is up to 15%, right?
Yep.
So should it be at least 1%, like a range, 1 to 15%?
Are you, Councilman?
I'm just asking a question, right? So if we say up to 15%, technically they could be 0, right?
It technically could, sure. I mean, I think ultimately we just wanted to provide the flexibility. I mean, if there was ever an instance where the council just deemed that a that there should be 0%, then I guess they could ultimately, they could rely on the last section where they could waive the project altogether.
Gotcha. And the council is going to set that percentage, correct?
The council would have the last say on that. I think the CBA would be the one that would work with the developer in order to put together the agreement. But ultimately, the council would be the ultimate arbiter in that situation.
Thank you.
So we're good? Okay, Councilwoman Atkins, you're up.
Okay. Still in section 4, there was a section, I believe, that was added that speaks to deposit and control of the reinvestment funds.
Yes.
I did not see this in the original ordinance, but the commentary in the amendment says that any reinvestment fund described in this ordinance deposited shall be directed to either the general fund or the Economic Development Corporation Fund, and shall be used specifically for the purposes proposed by the CCDA and approved by the Gary Common Council. Good.
Kind of sort of good. It just, the two options there, I think it should be one or the other. If it's for the community benefits agreement, I think it should be in a non-reverting fund where it goes to, where it's definitely earmarked that it's just for this project or projects.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
One of the things that I know that was discussed prior was the idea that the council would ultimately could vote on that, on where the funds were directed on a project by project basis. I think that also allows for some flexibility as well.
Mr. Chair, this is Dr. McLeod.
Dr. McLeod?
I wouldn't recommend that it goes to the general fund. Maybe it needs to go to a restricted fund or a set aside fund.
Yeah, that's why I talked about the non-reverting fund.
I would yield to. Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, this is Lori Latham. I would also add that setting up a separate fund, even if it's a non-reverting fund, will also make it easier for the State Board of Accounts. Funds just going into the general fund makes it much more difficult for accounting purposes and auditing purposes.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, within the general fund, they set up funds. In other words, it would be set, all money must start in the general fund. It can't start somewhere else. And then you simply isolate it within the general fund itself. Probably a person you can inquire about would be our chief of staff. I'm surprised the council don't know that. You send it into the general fund, then you set up a fund within the general fund. You don't somehow set it up outside. And all monies, and again, I agree with what the young lady just said, all government money has to be or should be audited by the State Board of Accounts. Matter of fact, I've had a conversation with them that you just can't take money, just send it anywhere. So they're unaware of where it went. I do not believe, for instance, I do not believe the Economic Development Corporation, I could be wrong about this, has ever really been audited by the State Board of Accounts. It may have. I just could not find any evidence of it. I was trying to get that information. But no, again, and I do apologize because I'd indicated I wouldn't make any input, but if I could just ask a question here, basically I don't have to worry about my amendment. It is now an amendment of this committee. Mine's gone, is that correct?
Well, I'm going to ask that your amendment, I'm going to make a motion that your amendment be amended by this amendment. Yes, sir.
But I'm saying you can forget about mine at this point. It's gone. You've now taken control and put it in this committee. So it doesn't matter. It would, well, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is there any other question by council members? Councilwoman Atkins?
So still in section 4, community benefits agreements, required terms. So this speaks to the local hiring. It looks like the change that was proposed just stated as such. Local hiring, all CBA applicable developments agree to follow the City of Gary's local hiring ordinance, applicable at the time of hiring employees for the project's construction and any jobs available following the completion of construction. So prior to, I think that the local hiring term was somewhat vague. It just stated that a certain percentage, well, it didn't define a percentage, it just says that they agreed that the percentage of jobs offered to the citizens of Gary will follow the local hiring ordinance. So this speaks to that, but then it also speaks to construction jobs at the time of the project construction, as well as after completion of destruction, relative to whatever the hiring ordinance is that is applicable at that time.
Okay.
All right, living wage. The only change that was relative to this section between the original ordinance and the new is that there was an input that all CBA applicable developments versus the general, any developer, they just changed that. And then also stated that this last section, any development not covered by the CBA, which is the collective bargaining agreement, not this CBA, will receive a living wage for their work and will submit certified payrolls to the CCBA upon request to confirm payment to such wage. So if there's any need to confirm the payroll, the CCBA organization can do that based on this, and they'll get a report.
I just have a question.
Councilwoman Brown?
Mm-hmm. Will they have someone, I don't know, a compliance officer or someone who will get those certified payrolls and will know how much those persons are being paid? And if they are in fact receiving a living wage?
That should be the responsibility of the compliance officer.
Mr. Chair, to answer the councilwoman's question, that would be correct. Your assertion is correct.
Thank you. Okay, Councilwoman Atkins.
Okay, next section, labor standards and health benefits. No major changes, just the change to define that this is respective to all CBA applicable developments. And then again, same language as before, except for there was an addition that verification of the developer's policy to provide health insurance benefits shall be submitted to the compliance officer. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay to keep moving?
Yes.
Okay.
All good.
All right. So now we're in section 5, which in the amendment speaks to community engagement. The only major changes here was related to the referral of the planning director versus director was one. So the previous language states that prior to submitting to the city council a request for approval of land transfer or tax abatement related to the project, the planning director shall hold at least 2 public meetings to take place in the impact area. And so on the amendment, proposed amendment, it just says that prior to submitting to the city council for request for tax abatement related to a project and or land approval transfer for redevelopment, the director shall hold at least 2 public meetings. So I'm not sure the director of who, the redevelopment director, or that was the only change that we had. And again, it spoke about the public meeting. So it says that in the previous, that the public meeting, both the planning director and the CGCBA, which was changed to this acronym CCBA, shall present the information. So in the amendment, it just says that in a public meeting, both the compliance officer and the CCBA shall present information, which is clear, but in section 1-A, I don't know who the director is. The director of what?
Mr. Chair, if I could, that relates back to the definition section. Hold on, let me pull that up.
Maybe I missed it. I didn't change.
The director
is redevelopment.
Yes.
I see you, Ronnie. Okay. I forgot about that.
No. That's a good question.
My bad. Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Oh, this is Carolyn. Mr. Chair, if I may say something, we are talking about community engagement now and the meetings that are to be held in the impact area. But in the changes that were made by the administration, they redefined impact area as 400 feet from the project. So I don't know how, 400 feet is like a driveway. So I don't know how you can hold a meeting of people in the impact area if the impact area is defined as 400 feet from the borders of the project. Do you see the problem there?
Yeah.
Which is why we didn't really define it. For instance, in the Broadway Lofts project, it would be the 4th district. Period. That's the impact area,
Let me go to Mr.
But
Cole.
it says
Cole,
here,
Yes, Brown.
it says if a meeting within the impact area is not practical, the prospective parties to the CBA shall agree upon a practical location. So if within 400 feet is not practical, then you would agree on someplace else, is what I assumed.
Yeah.
Closest to the most, right.
Right. Well, that's true, Councilwoman, except that when they redefined impact area, the area was so small, then what do you do? Who gets to be part of those community engagement meetings if it's only 400 feet from the project?
Well, it would be at a place, at a location closest to and most accessible by the residents of the impact area. That's what I read.
Yeah, the residents of the impact area, but they have redefined, the administration redefined impact area to be 400 feet from the development. And I guess what I'm saying, not just the location of the meeting, but who are we talking about then? For instance, if there were going to be something on Lake Street, the impact area would be, the first district. It would be a very large, section of town. It actually, because we're divided into districts, that's the way it would go. Of course, everyone in the district, wouldn't be part of the meeting, but that would be up to the council person from that district to organize people to come to the meeting to talk to developers about what the project is going to be about and how it's going to affect the lives of the people who live in the impact area, which is basically the councilmanic district.
Well, that's what it says, though. At a location closest to and most accessible by the residents of the impact area. So it would be up to that person to find some place that was accessible for the residents of that area.
Yeah.
I think the point is, though, if the impact area is only 400 feet, like that's not even a lot of residents. There's only a handful of people who can fit within 400 feet of the project. So it almost eliminates the impact area.
No, then that's up to the district council person to find a place within that area that's accessible for whomever, however many people. If it's only 400, if it's only 40 people, then it's up to them to find a place. That's what I read, and maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Attorney Paul, can you weigh in?
Absolutely. So Two things here. The changing of the impact area was not to disclude anybody from attending these meetings. It's a public
Right.
meeting, so anybody can attend these meetings. And the councilwoman's absolutely correct. If this is a project and it's got, it's in an, maybe it's in an industrial area, there's not much residential areas around, or, there's not much residential, or there's not much of an area to have a public meeting there, we could always agree to have it in the, that meeting wherever the general public would like, wherever it would be best to reasonably hold that meeting.
Right.
The purpose of the mailings, so for example, what I want to be clear is the notice goes out pursuant to Indiana Code 532-1. And under that code, subsection B, it requires both a mailing and a publication. So there would be a publication that would go out that would notify the general public. Obviously, the council members are free to, advertise the public meeting however much they want. The members of the CBA are free to advertise the meeting however they want to get the word out that this meeting is going to happen. It doesn't just limit it to people in the impact area attending the meeting. The impact area was for notification purposes. With notification purposes, as far as, with the actual mailings that go out, we consistently have BZA meetings, planning commission meetings, where in order to just have a daycare started, you're notifying upwards of 100 residents, or, and that's not 100 residents, 100 different actual dwellings, which could have several people that are involved in that. So you're sending out, certified mail to, 100 different households. That's upwards of $700 just in notifying the public of this meeting. So before it was the census tract, which it's a massive area, and so you're going to inundate costs at a astronomical rate by sending out by sending out mail notices to all those individuals of public hearings. I mean, that's just one of those things. And in addition to that, one of the main reasons that we changed it was ultimately because a lot of these developments are going to be up and down Broadway, and you're going to have, if it's within the census tract, that's the dividing line for a number of the census tracts out there. So in this instance, Councilwoman Atkins, she's involved with it, and it's in her district, but right across the street, you got Councilman Weatherspoon, who's not going to be involved with it because it's a mere matter of feet. Whereas if you do the 400 feet, that's something that's common practice. That's something that we do for the BZA for major major changes to both platting, variances, special uses. So it just seemed apropos to use the same metric and the same process.
Attorney Pohl, I think you've hit the main point of contention, that reducing the impact area disenfranchises a large group of people, which goes against the very spirit of the CBA in the first place. And I think when you mention, just being able to get out of notifying so many people, I think that is the main point of contention. Setting aside the meeting where it happens, by limiting the impact area, you basically define and you disqualify who is being impacted. And that, I believe, that is a serious point of contention.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Godwin.
So I just want to be clear. You said that 400 feet is the standard, a 400-foot radius, I'm assuming,
yes,
is the standard for the BZA?
That's
in
correct.
terms of zoning variances?
Yes, that's standard.
And is it a loss to the city? For example, when we look at the cost of the application, just for example, for a zoning variance, that cost is less than the cost of sending out the mail, right?
That cost is borne by the applicant.
The cost of doing the mailing?
Yes, that is borne by the applicant.
Gotcha. Okay. And so is the concern that having a larger, 400 feet does seem like a small area for a major development. I kind of get it if you're talking about daycare on a block, or I want to have my fence to be a little taller than what the city allows. I could see having a smaller area. But when you're talking about 11 million, 50 million, 100 million development, where we as a council are saying that someone doesn't have to pay $500, $600, $1 million worth of taxes, I think the implications of a tax abatement at this amount is far greater than can my fence be a foot higher than the city allows, right? So I think that while I understand the costs, measuring cost, I also think that those are apples and oranges, as Mr. Lay might say. He may not say it in this instance, but that's a fence being 1 foot higher is a lot different than us giving somebody $500,000 to $1 million or more tax abatement. I think those just aren't equivalent. But I get it. You have to have some kind of space, but maybe we can find some middle ground.
Well, and I mean, to that point, I don't think we're talking apples and oranges, because when we have a rezone, for example, of a major, like for example with the casino, that property has to be rezoned in order for it to, for that to go in. That's a major change. A zoning change is a major change that does impact. But really, it's for that purpose. It was only 400 feet that that we had to. That you have to notify the individuals in that area. Obviously, it goes out by the public, though, and I think that this is kind of getting lost in the sauce here. Is that there is still public notice that goes out to everybody, via publication, and it's not to say that individuals aren't going to be notified by other means, either through their council members, either through the city itself, or the CBA. But I think in requiring the census tract that everybody gets noticed within that census tract provides some challenges, given the fact that like as I stated before, you're not going to include anybody across the street on Broadway, and a lot of these projects may be up and down Broadway. You're also going to inundate I think it impacts the actual project with a fairly large cost that I don't think is small by any means. I understand that, in the grand scheme of things, sure, there is going to be certain aspects of, the idea that, okay, yeah, this is a large, these could be large developments, but again, the casino was a large development. It goes through the BZA, that gets rezoned. That's, it's a very, very similar process, so.
I would just say quickly, if I can, Mr. Chair, that if I'm a developer and I'm going to save $800,000 to $1 million plus in taxes, I really wouldn't care whether I had to spend $700 for mailers versus $1,500 for mailers.
Right.
I mean, that's a small amount of money for a developer. That's peanuts. But that's all I'll say about that.
Let's have everyone else, please, no comment while council is talking, unless you're being recognized by the chair. Councilman Garvin?
Oh, I'm done. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
All right.
Any other council members?
So again, Mr. Chair, I just, those are good points, but I just want to make sure that we have the appropriate actions. If we do have concerns about items such as that, what will be the next steps to get a reasonable recommendation for us to consider as the appropriate rate is to move forward?
Well, my standpoint is I like to stay consistent where we are at with the city, because if you start making standards different from another group, I think you show not balance. You're not showing balance going forward. So I'm fine with the 400 radius. I think we still have a responsibility as elected officials to get the word out. And these meetings does not stop anyone from coming to these meetings, whether you're inside that radius or not, and speaking whatever you want to speak on that project, because the project is a city project, not so much a district. It may be happening inside of a district, but it's still part of the city.
Okay. Am I good to keep it moving?
Yes, you're good.
All right. So this next one kind of speaks to what Mr. Attorney Poe just went over in terms of the notice. It speaks to Indiana Code 5-3-1-2B. So just stating that the developer shall mail the notices to the residents within an impact area no less than 10 days via certified mail, and also should include meeting details. The balance of this information was the same from the original ordinance. Mr. Paul, I got a question. I haven't looked up this Indiana code, but the mailings have to be certified? That's a question. And also, do they have to be at least 10 days before? That's a question as well.
Moving it to 10 days was in accordance with the Indiana's code section 5-3-2-1. We just wanted to ensure that there was just that uniformity. So, you know, if it's referring to that section, that it's the same timeline. So there is no confusion there. It is our practice to require within the city of Gary, for the BZA purposes, that those mailings go out certified mail. So we have proof that that proof of mailing has occurred, that these individuals have received this notice, that there has been this opportunity to remonstrate or to add their input. So yeah, I mean, we do require it to be certified.
Okay.
Any questions, council members, before we move on? Councilwoman Atkins?
All right. Okay, we're going to skip over this one. This was section 3, I'm sorry, item 3 under section 5, community engagement, that spoke to council member engagement. There was no change. I just noted the director, but Attorney Poe cleared that up for us. That's director as defined is who the director is, which is the redevelopment director. Section 6, we're moving along. So section 6, the original ordinance stated that the planning director shall provide a community benefits report to the city council regarding any project. The proposed amendment states that the compliance officer should be the person responsible for providing that information to the council. And then it also gave us some more definition in terms of the frequency. So that report should be submitted to the council annually by the second council meeting in April. The annual report shall be prepared by, again, the compliance officer and submitted also via the redevelopment department. Section 6, I'm sorry.
Is there any questions for anyone on that? Okay, Councilwoman.
All right. Under section 6, portion part 2, no changes here. The only change was just redefining the acronym CGCBA to CCBA. This was a change that was added to the proposed amendment relative to the future report. So all future annual reports shall include details describing compliance or non-compliance, which items agreed to as part of the CBA. Annual reports will be required for the term of the benefits received. So this kind of spoke to what Councilwoman Brown asked initially as well, getting reports in terms of compliance and non-compliance. This portion was not included in the original ordinance. This section was on the original ordinance, it was under section 6, part 3, but with the addition is actually part 4. There was no change. This speaks to us, receiving the report prior. So the CCBA shall also receive a copy of the community benefits report prior to submission to the council. The last portion, no, it's not the last, but this next section speaks to, to ensure expeditious community engagement process, the planning director shall submit the initial community benefits report within 6 weeks from the date notice is sent about the public meeting. So the change just stated that, again, it's the compliance officer, not the planning director, and that report should be submitted within 2 weeks from the initial date of the final public meeting, since there's a requirement of 2. And I'm gonna skip this last one because again, we've confirmed that anytime we saw planning director, it was changed to director, who is the redevelopment director. All right. Can I go to section 7?
Yes.
All right. Section 7, no major change at all, just added a line that stated in the event it is determined that the developer is non-compliant. And again, this was relative to the enforcement committee. So it says the enforcement committee shall be led by the city's corporation council and comprised of representatives for redevelopment department, Law Department, and CCBA. In the event it is determined the developer is non-compliant, the committee shall negotiate a corrective action plan, which must include a specific timetable to rectify concerns with measurable steps to address those concerns. The original ordinance said the same. It had the same members. So there was no major change.
Okay.
Portion 2 under section 7, there was no change in terms of what the compliance officer's duties are. The compliance officer shall work with the developer to create a corrective action plan to address violations of all CBAs. The compliance officer shall present the corrective action plan to the enforcement committee for review and approval. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the only, I guess, question that I had is if the council also wanted the corrective action plan, because I don't think that anything above stated that we would receive the corrective action plan, but if we wanted a copy of that.
I would say yes. Any questions on that by any council members? Back in your hands, Councilwoman.
Okay. Failure to comply, there was no change, but the statement says failure to comply shall result in denial, suspicion, termination, and revocation or withdrawal of any city-issued benefit or public support by the Common Council of the CBA applicable development. So this is key, I guess. This is the power of the council, right? If there's no, if there is non-compliance, we have the ability to revoke the benefit.
Yes.
Last section was section 4, the original. It was kind of completely stricken. I'll read the original ordinance statement. For any CBA applicable development that exceeds $5 million, the developer agrees to fund one compliance officer in addition to any employees working for the city at the time of the CBA applicable development through a grant to the CBA. So this is key that we've already discussed in terms of the funding for this compliance officer. The amended change states that all costs for compliance shall be paid solely by the developer. So this is what Attorney Pohl stated in reference to Tammy. Is kind of dependent upon, I guess, resource stability, capability. And if there is a need to have a dedicated member, then that cost should be paid for by the developer. I get it right, Attorney Pohl?
I couldn't have said it better.
All right, thank you. Send me my JD so I can finally get some. I heard my JD dog. I need to get a JD soon. All right, this is the last one. That's for Attorney Life. Just got one more year to go.
I think you guys know enough now. You could bypass it. They just have a silly requirement. You have to have it to take the test in Indiana.
This was no change respective to the clawback procedures, and I think we've discussed that. So enforcement of this ordinance shall be made pursuant to the clawback procedures used when granting, tax abatement pursuant to, and this is a code that speaks to tax abatement detailed in the development agreement. So no change. And lo and behold, this is the last one that I caught, y'all. So this one is, no major change. I'll read this. So this is the last section of section 7. The Common Council and the executive of the city shall each have the authority to exempt a development from this ordinance after proposing a separate ordinance that is specific to the development and that outlines the reason for exempting the project and determines that the exemption is in the best interest of the city and its citizens. The ordinance shall be subject to public debate, and input. Now that last sentence was stricken, but this kind of came up in our meeting last week, right? So again, this is just saying that the council and the executive of the city has the authority to exempt any developer from the terms of the CBA ordinance if it's in the best interest of the city. That's all I got for us.
Sounds good. Thank you. You have done an awesome job tonight.
Just being a team
Yes, thank
player.
you.
Yes, you are. Is there any
Yeah.
questions by any council members before I open it up? At this time, I will take any questions from the public at this time. Please state your name
Oh,
before you start.
okay. This is Carolyn McCready.
Yes.
I have a couple of things that I'd like to talk about. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Councilwoman Atkins. This was a Herculean job, and she really put everything in perspective and allowed us to look at this, at the issues of the ordinance. My problem is with the compliance officer. One of my problems is with the compliance officer issuing an annual report. That probably wouldn't work. Let's say we have 5 different projects going on at the same time, and they start at different times. And the compliance officer has to wait until the first meeting in April or the second meeting in April to issue a report on what's going on. By that time, there could be all kinds of non-compliant issues happening. And it seems to me that a good compliance officer and Councilman Brewer and Godwin, we worked on the language of what a compliance officer would do when we were kind of looking at the job description of a compliance officer. They have to be on site. They have to check. They have to look and see. They have to eyeball people. They have to get those certified payrolls. It's an ongoing occupation. It's a watchdog. And so having just an annual report is definitely not enough because, you know, the train could have left the station. I mean, they could be non-compliant for 6 months. And if the ordinance says they only have to issue a report once a year, then that doesn't do much good in terms of trying to keep up with compliance. So I would suggest that part of it be stricken, and that we should look at something more like the compliance officer shall report to the city council every 2 weeks. Because that compliance officer has got to be on site, got to be on the job, and has got to report. That's, you know, we know that the history of switching people around and acting as if, you know, they have people of color working on the job, and then they just put people in different areas. They don't even bother doing that now, but that's the way it used to be. And that's why this language is in there, and why the compliance officer is so important, to keep an eye on what the developer says they're doing, who they're actually hiring. Are those people really there, and are they there, you know, on a consistent basis? Or has someone else come in to substitute for them, and we don't know about it? So it's very, very important if we're talking about local hiring and making it real. I also would like to say, and I know my committee members have lots of things to say too, but I also say that the $1 million threshold, I believe, is way too high. If we accept the language that CDBG funds and home funds can't be counted, then you know, it'll just be the tax abatement. And you know, this is a pretty big job that this Broadway Lofts is $13 million, and yet it wouldn't even qualify if the threshold is $1 million. And so what we're talking about is jobs that we will have no control over in the city, and yet they're getting tax abatements. So I'm not saying that every little job should have a tax, that there should be no threshold. I know that's the way we wrote it initially, but we could probably agree to some kind of threshold. That would make sense, but $1 million would cut out, I think, way too many developments and not serve our purpose, because we really want to make sure that we have local hiring and that there be community benefits in repayment for the tax breaks that developers are getting. So I'll leave it with that and listen to what my committee members have to say.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, this is Dr. McLeod.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd just like to thank all of you that are on the line here, especially Councilwoman Ty Atkins, who did an outstanding job overviewing this. Maybe we need to call you Councilwoman Attorney Atkins. But
so.
I would like to, because you really took your time, and this really helps us too understand better the wording and the language. I believe that the threshold is too high also. I would recommend maybe a floor of $250,000 possibly. I also agree with my colleague that the compliance officer reporting should maybe be, if not every 2 weeks, that may be a little too much, Carolyn, but at least once a month, I think that person should report to the Common Council. And there was one other thing, I can't think of it right now, but I'll yield the floor to any of the other members on the line here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, this is Lori. And I'd like to echo what everyone else has said about how well this meeting was facilitated. You know, I fundamentally disagree with where this is going and the spirit of the amendment, but I do appreciate the administration's and the council's time and effort tonight. I think tonight we have truly enjoyed elevated discourse, and you know, even we can disagree, but it won't be because the information wasn't presented and that there hasn't been a level of transparency with this process tonight. I would just start my comments with a recount of a recent privilege that I had of sitting down with the former mayor of Crown Point. I was complimenting their ongoing Broadway developments, and he noted how Crown Point has an ordinance that directs all new commercial development. For instance, it has to be colonial style and they have to be brick builds. So whether it's a McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever, when they move into Crown Point, this is the standard that they use for their development. And of course, my question, since I'm usually the person who's pushing back, I asked, well, do you ever get any pushback? And he said, no, it's our law. And if they don't want to comply, we don't want them in Crown Point. I'm also a part of a group that gets a firsthand look at how differently Spectacle Gaming is treating the city of Terre Haute versus what I've been able to witness with them here in the city of Gary. And I can tell you firsthand, Spectacle does what Terre Haute tells them to do and not the other way around. And I dropped this in the chat that this is why I wonder about Broadway laws, because these developers haven't tried to work with our committee. They haven't tried to comply with the ordinance. They have not suggested ways to provide projects or donations to parks or to schools. They have not committed to hiring local residents to build the development. They decided that it would just be easier to convince all of us to change our law that we passed to raise money for things that we need than to try to begin and to provide any real community benefits. So I just want to add that the credibility of our committee, the number of our members, the threshold of the project, these probably shouldn't be the first things that we question or that we discuss. Instead, we should be taking a serious look at the Broadway Lofts developers and a good hard look at ourselves when we would let a group that puts about $1 million of private money in and get, Carolyn, did you say it was a $13 million project?
Almost, yes.
Almost $13 million out of it with zero commitment to local hiring or community benefits and who want to come in and change a law that we enacted to improve our community. And I'll just close with this, that our original ordinance gave us a real shot at healthy, sustainable development in Gary, Indiana. With CBA, cities across the country are learning how to improve their communities without the rapid gentrification or displacing the people who call the place home, like we've seen in other cities like Chicago and Oakland, Providence, Rhode Island. We had a real shot at that, but I feel like we took at least 2 steps back tonight. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, if I could just respond real quickly. Ms. Latham knows I absolutely love her. She's a good friend of mine. But she's incorrect about the Broadway lofts having anything to do with the CBA amendments. There's no discussion between the administration and Broadway lofts about any of these changes. These are simply changes that I think the administration had to take a hard look at as far as where the city saw opportunity, where the city saw the loss of opportunity. We think that as amended, I think it would at least provide some flexibility for the council to handle, working with the developer, as opposed to kind of a lot of undefined issues that would probably cause a lot of confusion going forward. It's not to say that the CBA was not very well. It was very well put together as far as the process of how it came about. However, I do think that in looking at the grand scheme of things, this is something that really needed more engagement from the council, as it was formed, as opposed to the 2, and I guess involvement in the 2 years where it was being developed, because this is a major, major, major change. As we'd stated before, there's nothing like this in the state of Indiana. As it pertains to the compliance officers and things like that, these are things that are not just common parlance here in Northwest Indiana. It is going to be a major change for the area. It's not to say that Gary cannot be a leader in that, but we really have to really think this out before essentially putting developers through this very, very heavily bureaucratic process. So
Rodney, if I may say something.
Wait. Let's not interrupt. Let me.
Okay.
Please.
Okay. I'm sorry, Rodney.
Ultimately, I do think that there is promise in this discussion that's happened tonight. I do think that there is probably more discussion to be had, and I on behalf of the administration, I think we agreed with Councilman Lay that there are things about this that we should probably start fresh with, as opposed to kind of just continuously thinking, all right, we'll just put a Band-Aid on this one, put a Band-Aid on this one, put a Band-Aid on this one as we go. I think there are goals that everybody wants to see happen here. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're going to put developers through this, this very bureaucratic process, we got to make sure that these processes actually can achieve those goals. I know that one of which was the union representation, which I don't think, as Councilman Lay pointed out, I don't think that is something that we can even get to through this agreement. I think that's got to be a completely different conversation that we should definitely be involved in. But ultimately, we're going to have to work together to get through this. So I'll yield the floor to Ms. McCready.
Ms. McCready.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting, Rodney. I don't understand why this ordinance would be characterized as bureaucratic. It has 3 basic functions. It proposes that people who live in the city of Gary get the jobs that are offered through construction projects in the city of Gary, and a component of that is job training. So that's 1 in subsection A, job training, because we know right now there is no one being trained in Gary right now in construction. And that is something that our committee has taken up as a project of its own. True, it's not stated in the CBA, but it is stated that job training money can come from the 15%. The other thing is the community benefit. For instance, if in the 4th district, a group of citizens decided that they wanted to make an improvement to a park in the 4th district, that's how it would work. They would tell the developer, this is what we want. We know that, 15% of what your tax break is, and this is what we want to see happen with that money. We want maybe some of it to go to job training, and we want some of it to go to community benefit. But without this language, without this ordinance, which I find liberating and not bureaucratic, we don't have any leverage. We're going back to the good old days when the developers called all the shots, and the people just went along with it because they had no voice. And in this way, when, let's say, the Broadway Lofts project in the 4th district, people who want to be part of making decisions about improvements in the community can do that, can talk to each other about what they would like to see. Let's say there were, there was $50,000 available to do something in the 4th district. I'm sure that a group of people in the 4th district could figure out how that money could be spent. That money, should go to a non-reverting fund, I agree, and then be spent for the purpose that the people in the 4th district say it should be spent for. That's not bureaucracy. That's just straightforward, good planning and incorporating what the community needs. Remember, they're getting tax dollars based on this city. That means the taxpayers are paying them for the privilege of getting a tax break. We want something back for that. And when I say we, I don't mean our CBA committee. I mean the people who live in that district.
Okay.
So, there's nothing really bureaucratic about it. It just says that we sit down with them. We find out what it is they want to do. We find out what their intention is, what the scope of their project is. We talk to them about local hiring. We talk to them about community improvements. There's nothing bureaucratic in that. Absolutely nothing. And so I know it's new, and it's what you said, Rodney, it's leadership. Are we going to be leaders in Gary, or are we going to just do things the way we've always done them?
Okay.
This is an opportunity to change our MO.
Got a nice little
Okay.
time. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Yes.
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 Oh, excuse me.
Okay, go ahead. And then I'll go after him, if you don't mind.
Okay. No, if that's fine with you. Okay. My name is Roman Bronson. I'm with the Indiana Plan. I'm also part of the CBA committee. I just want to focus in a little bit on the subject of union representation. I apologize. I'm on my iPhone. But anyway, I am directly involved with unions and residents, trying to get them into these construction-related projects. We've been in this area for 25 years. We have a lot of experience working through the collective bargaining agreements of these different unions and contractors to make sure that our residents are available to be put on these projects. It is by far a viable program because of the efforts of past members pushing this very important fact that Gary residents do not have a lot of opportunities to gain a construction experience. So while we all can say maybe some of our contractors can do more in that arena, I can definitely say that out-of-state contractors and some of the people outside of our area have they have done none of the pre-planning to identify community people to say, all right, this is the pool of workforce that will be on this project. I can say for sure that dealing with NVAH, BWI, and Equiteam, they do not have, I would say this, they do not have a viable plan to get Gary residents on this project, at least that they were willing to share with me. At one point, we did have some communication. We were emailing back and forth. At some point, that completely dropped off. They no longer replied to any of my requests to see who are the subcontractors, because depending on who their subcontractors, we may be able to find something that'll be favorable for the developer and the residents for them to get this experience. So only thing I would say is, please don't use the fact that although we do have some issues getting more Gary residents into these unions as a reason to torpedo this amendment. Just yesterday, we were able to put out 4 individuals from various places around Lake County with the electricians union, who has been very helpful in keeping the Indiana plan relevant. And we also going to be working with Painters District Council 91. And we're also going to be working with the Carpenters, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio region of Carpenters on some other projects around Gary. So I'm saying directly that what you guys do, and forgive me, I don't mean to be so informal, what the council works tirelessly to do to keep Gary residents engaged on these construction projects has not been without being results. And I will leave it at this. I am a union electrician. I am part of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, local union 697. One of the reasons that I was able to get into my union was because one of the individuals that were voting on whether or not to accept me was a recipient of the Indiana plan. And that program exists because of the efforts of the council, past administrations, as well as some state representatives as well. So I'm just saying, as far as the union representation and getting unions involved, we will handle that. That's not an issue. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Yes, this is Emmett Mosley. And once again, I do want to thank you for this opportunity and all those who have contributed to this discussion, this debate. And I just want to hopefully not distract from anything, but I want to focus on the fact that even today, I drove all around the city today. And I'm a former, I got in this business April 16, 1984, when they were building the Central High School, okay? And I just was fortunately that I was an international labor union at that time. But I want to say that monitoring is so important. And I thank God for a person like Mrs. Frida Dawkins and Fred Vasquez, who on a weekly basis reported, because they had their meetings, and on a weekly basis they talked to the mayor of East Chicago, because it took us 2 years to get a local hiring ordinance in East Chicago. And it was based on Gary and Newark, New Jersey's local hiring plan. And so monitoring is so important, and that's why we had it as a component of the CBA. But if you drove around today, and I took pictures, I don't care whether it was at 11th and Harrison, 10 workers, and none of them looked like someone from Gary, okay? Then went up to 25th, okay? And I'm talking about big projects, and we are not being involved in those projects. I don't, $13 million is $13 million. I don't know who the folks are who are doing this law. I would really love to check and see who are you talking about that's going to be renters to these properties, these facilities. Are they going to be eligible for subsidized, or are you trying to get other people? So what I'm saying is monitoring is so important to this. And Gary has to say, we got to start looking out for our people. It's nice to look out for everybody, but we need, it's like Black Lives Matter. we know every life matter, but because of the injustice that we have faced, we got to be ready to deal with some things in a different way. And the only way we can do that is that people, businesses sit down with us and say, here's what I'm proposing, and so we can respond to that. We're not people that don't have heart, but we have to start looking out for our community. I was just looking at also the tearing down of the auditorium, and you say, well, where are we? You know, it was nothing but the people on the sideline. I don't know what they're doing. They're checking for lines, I guess, but nothing but NIPSCO workers. But none of the NIPSCO workers look like me. The people tearing the building down, none of them look like me. So we got to take this serious and stop looking out for the people who are coming in here, taking advantage of the census tracts, using that to get grants, using that to get partnership, using that to get support. We have to be willing to say we're going to stand with the people, and the people will back us. And the idea of people in that community having a say so. Go over to the casino and see how, you know, we thought it was just going to be a few streets where people were going to be moved. I think it's been more than just a few. But I have a history. I was involved with the West Side.
More people.
Yeah. Let me just finish with this. I was involved with the building of the Chicago Bulls Stadium, and involved with the building of the White Sox Stadium with Reinsdorf and Pizer and all of them. And I'm telling you, what they offered the people, if it wasn't for community organizations standing by, those people would have been, they offered them $20,000 for the houses. So we have to take this serious. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
President Brewer, may I speak?
Yes, you may.
Doreen Carey, a resident of the city of Gary. I just want to reiterate that it would be great, or if you could encourage to expand the impact zone beyond 400 feet. I understand what you're saying about the mailing, but there's more to the impact zone than mailing. It's the impact community benefits decisions. The impact area was the area where the community benefits would actually be located. Now, I can also see the value of saying when it comes to job training, it's not just one community, but the idea that a district or two districts, if the area is shared by two districts, to call together the people to talk about what the benefits might be and how they could agree to them. Having a larger impact area would certainly make that easier. So I don't know how to compare that to the area that you would mail to, because I feel like one of our jobs is to get the word out to people so that they can be part of the discussion. That's not just letters or announcements in the newspaper in the public notice section. So that's one thing. But I'd also like to encourage you to actually state in the ordinance that a non-reverting fund will be set up for those community benefit dollars, so that it's very clear, that that's where the funds are going. And I truly appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this discussion, and I see it going forward. And I think it would be a real mistake to step backwards now and not move forward with the decisions that are being made by the council right now, because that does give us the foundation on which we can, really move toward, making more decisions that might be more specific to the city. But let's not step backward at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could very briefly, as it pertains to the impact area, the only sections that I'm noticing here are pertaining to either the public hearings and the notices as where the impact area was actually even mentioned. So and that was really the reason of changing it from the census tract to 400 feet. There isn't anything in here in the ordinance or in the original ordinance or the amendment that states that the impact area is the only area that receives the actual community benefit 15%. So I would have to disagree with Ms. Carey's interpretation as to whether or not changing the impact area size actually changes how that impacts the individuals within that size. So yeah, I mean, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Okay. I will have these changes presented at the next council meeting, where the council will vote them up or vote them down, and we will see what happens at that point there. I think we had some very good dialogue and a very good overview that was taken on tonight. Councilwoman Ty Atkins, I do want to appreciate the hard work she put into it also, but it's a community effort of all of us working together. And I thank this committee for continuing to work with this council and Attorney Poe, the work you have put into it, and Mr. Lay also.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a comment before you close out, but go ahead. No, go ahead, and then I will comment.
Okay. Yeah, but just want to thank everyone for the hard work that you have continued to put in. I don't believe this is something that we have all taken lightly. We are taking the time to make sure we get those corrections. And I understand the concerns of the administration to make sure we're not presenting ourselves where we are scaring off developers from coming to the city. One thing I'm not going to play like that we don't have problems inside our city. I'm not going to play like we don't have a crime problem. I'm not going to play like our schools are in shambles. We have issues in our city. So we're not like the Crown Points. We're not like the Hammonds and Hobarts and those other communities around us. We're not. I wish I could say we're on the same playing field, but we're not on the same playing field. So we have to take these things into consideration when we're crafting something of this nature. And as it was stated earlier, this is the only one of this kind inside the entire state. So we don't want to put ourselves where we're maxing ourselves out and we're sending our competition, we're helping our competition grow, and we're not part of growth. Because we saw at one time we had a big development had a chance to leave Hammond to come here, but they was able to offer them a greater benefit and they wind up staying inside of Hammond. So we want to put ourselves on the same playing field as everyone else. Attorney Lay at this time.
Yeah, I'm getting somewhat confused about the process. My position in terms of moving, and I assure you, very few people that impact my decision, and certainly the mayor, it may have been suggested, he does not impact any decision. I initially had decided to repeal it. The only person that temporarily slowed it down was Mr. Godwin himself. Now, again, I don't understand some of the discussions that went on in the previous meeting, that there would be a discussion with various people involved. Apparently, we now are going past that. So I guess my question goes to the process. When can I make, an ordinance is coming through to, in fact, repeal 9305. Do we go through the amendment and everything around 9305? Or do the first thing we do is to decide if the council wants to repeal? If it does not want to repeal, that certainly ends pretty much, you know, what I do with 9305. So that's why, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Godwin. I'm saying it's like the chicken and the egg. I believe the first thing we should determine whether or not the council, which is a substantially different council, is prepared to repeal this ordinance. Again, and it's not based upon any conversation with the mayor, but I think people have been talking about stuff they did for 20 years. I've been involved for 52 years. I was one of Richard Hatcher's youngest appointees, a new career. So I fully understand the city. Been here all of my life, except for a couple of years. Again, somewhere in here, I think we should get, and this is just my opinion, that we should get whether or not we're going to repeal this out of the way and to allow it go forward. Because my general impression, the mayor has not said this. I certainly cannot speak for him, and he certainly can't speak for me. He can only make a guess. But if he has gotten rid of the MOU, I would suspect without any further participation, because he knew the extent of the participation at the last meeting when it was put off, said we're going to put it off to a later time. So I just need to know at what point in this entire process will the motion to repeal 9305 be considered? Or, I mean, I would assume you're going to move to pass it on third and final this coming council meeting, as I understand it. So there will be no further input by anyone other than a vote itself being taken. And I'm just simply suggesting that I've asked Attorney Poe to prepare a ordinance repealing 9305. If that fails, then everything else after that would be, would be fine. I don't expect to vote for any amendment. I just don't like this 9305. And I think when he said you put Band-Aids on it, I think that's what we're doing, piecemealing it, where because of the importance of this, we simply should take more time to set it forth. I do not believe that any ordinance, no matter who did it, should replace the government. And we are the government. We're not a town hall council or town hall meetings. So I would appreciate knowing at what point that my ordinance to repeal will be taken under consideration by the body.
Well, Attorney Lay, I would say I do plan on moving this on third and final September 1st. And I would say if the vote should fail, I believe at that time, I'm pretty sure it's obvious that the body is looking to entertain a motion to repeal it at that time.
1 second.
I'm fail to pass this on third and final with the amendment.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out, I mean, again, this may not be something that happens frequently. I'm not that familiar with it. I just don't know procedurally how we're going to do this. Do we first amend 9305? That's why I say I'm not sure my amendment is there at all.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Attorney Williams.
If indeed Attorney Lay, now I don't know if he changed his position. If Attorney Lay intends to withdraw the motion, it's his motion. There would have to first be a vote on his request to withdraw the motion. If that succeeded, then it's over. If it failed, then of course, as Councilman Brewer has indicated, then it would go forward to third and final. At that point, if that passed, then again, it's over. If it failed, then at that point, it would be appropriate to bring the motion to repeal.
Well, I disagree now. I'm not sure what this first motion is going to be unless you're saying the motion to withdraw my amendment. Is that what you're saying?
If you bring a motion to withdraw the amendment, that is the prevailing motion. It is your amendment. That's
fine. You didn't say what I was making the motion on. I agree with that. Okay. That's the way I would do it. But again, that's why I was saying, because as far as I'm concerned, my amendment is gone. In other words, I know they're going to amend the amendment, but which of course is one of the times I think we should almost say there will be a substitution. In other words, he's going to bring a whole new document. And in this substitution document, it won't be nothing about my amendment. That's why I say I think the council now, or the planning committee, has taken my motion, pretty much gotten rid of it. And where we at now would be his motion to substitute a whole new, for the lack of a better term, ordinance 9305B. It just simply is something coming through. So I don't care at what point we do it. I think it would be a much smoother way. It would almost, I mean, I don't have any problem making a motion to withdraw the amendment. I would assume that would almost should receive, unless I'm missing something, 100%, because here's coming something else through with the changing it. So whatever is worked out, I can live with. I really can. Just tell me when and at what point that I can make the motion to repeal. And we, in fact, you want to wait all the way to the end, because again, I'm anticipating something that does not have to be valid. I'm participating that you will get a veto. Now, I don't know that. The mayor hasn't personally called me. We talk on occasion. He hasn't personally called me and said, well, I'm going to veto, and I haven't called him to ask him to veto. If he chooses to do that, that's him. If he chooses to pass it, that's him again. But again, if the council repeals, then it won't get a veto at all, in my opinion, because then we have to do what we have already discussed. Based upon 4 or 5 people, there would have to be further discussions. Again, any piece of legislation on the civil side, basically, I think it was 1700 and something, the Supreme Court said the criminal law is not the same as civil law. Of course, they cause a lot of confusion, but it can't be retroactive. So that's the only thing that I was concerned about. I believe under the current set of circumstances, if the MOU is gone, I don't see how he can make input, although there has been an attempt through the amendment. In other words, we initially, there was a discussion about a repeal, that we wouldn't attempt this amendment. We have, and it has not worked. I mean, it has not worked. We seem to have forgotten about things, or which go to truth and veracity. We've asked for certain documents. We said, well, you can't see those. And I'm unclear myself now. The people, we've reduced it to 9, but do these 9 people just write a letter of interest? Or do they come in for interviews, go through billing I guess boards and commission, not billing, boards and commission? I guess that would be in the new ordinance. And I guess I'm more talking to the chairman than you, Mr. Williams. Is that in the new ordinance? How the 9 people are there? How do they get there? Do they go through boards and commissions? I got lost. And again, I think Councilwoman Atkins did a good job.
Yes.
And I think she raised some questions, exactly what's going on here.
Well, the first 6, which will be the council appointees, will be the committee, which we will seat the current committee.
You mean commissioners? Or you now?
Yes, right now, the commissioners, yes. And then the mayor will appoint the next 3.
So you're going to do how many? 14 and 3?
No, we're doing 9 total.
Oh, you're going to do 9 total. Okay, do you seat those people? And maybe I shouldn't even ask, as I'm not going to vote on it. Should you seat? So will they be required to come up with resumes and submit to interviews?
I'm requesting that also, yes.
That would be their resumes and interviews.
Yes. not interviews, just resumes. This is a current board that's currently working already. So I'm just asking that.
No, that's,
my
again,
request
that's not accurate. If they're currently working, you don't have to appoint them. No, that's not accurate. Once you say you're going to appoint somebody, that means they're not part of it. That's contradictory.
This is a current committee at this time. It was current before we put it together. So they will continue working. What I'm asking the council to do is sit the current board that's there. They will pick 6 that they would like to see sitting there, and we will appoint them.
How does the council do this? How do they do that?
The council will still get the resumes.
Because we've only heard from the total number of people we've heard from, and again, I apologize because I'm absolutely against it, is about four people. Most of the time they've been in what I would consider an attack mode, or they say, I agree, in other words, does not seem to be much independent thought going on here, but maybe that's just me listening for some independent thought. So, but again, that will all be in the new one. Now, are we going to take the amendment, your amendment first, or do I have to, that's what the earlier question. I'm of the opinion, but again, I'm gonna follow Mr. Williams on this, or Attorney Williams. If he is saying I need to withdraw my amendment, then I will do that. Then I would assume your amendment would come in, and I don't know if we vote on your amendment or do my motion to repeal. It's not that important as long as I get the motion to I'm sorry, not the motion, ordinance to repeal 9305. I'm just trying to figure out procedurally when that occurs.
So procedurally, if you don't make a motion to repeal your amendment, I can proceed at that time to go ahead and add my amendment at that time.
Okay, I will make a motion to withdraw, and at that point, I guess it will appear, I will in fact be speaking to the mayor, for the mayor, because I've spoke to Attorney Poe at great lengths, and also corporation, chief of staff. I started to say corporation counsel, it's chief of staff. So the first thing I will do at some point, when permitted by the President Godwin, is to make a motion to withdraw my amendment, which we would vote on. That would be a verbal motion. Then you will make, is that when we're on third and final? That's all I'm trying to figure out.
That's third and final, yes.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, we can wade through it at that time. Mr. Williams should be online to help.
So what we did, we took everything. We took what you had suggested. We took what the administration had suggested, and we sorted through those things on tonight. And
well, that's not. No. You attempted to. No, you didn't do it.
Well, that's your opinion, though, Mr. Lane.
No. You have to have interviews. Now, tell me how that's.
No, we didn't get. We wasn't dealing with interviews. We took everything that was in play. That wasn't even in your amendment about interviews.
Oh, of course it was. If what had happened, we amended it so much that the amendments are not even in there. It really isn't. They're not all there. We seem to have stopped putting it there. Attorney Poe is here. He'll tell you that wasn't. Mine was, in fact, interviews. Mine was residency. It just didn't make it there. That's all.
Well, we went on what we had in.
Oh, I agree. It's not. Well, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Wherever 5 votes are, that'll end it.
Took us line by line, issue by issue, and we've been over on 2 hours with this, and I just appreciate that we was able to go through it that way, where it was transparent to everyone exactly what we were doing. And I think we answered different things where you had concerns on, the mayor had concerns on, and we sorted out those issues. Some things we changed, some things we didn't. Some things we suggested to change.
My concerns are not mirrored with the mayor. I don't care what he has a concern on myself personally. No, it's mine. In other words, I agree. You have basically said what you're going to do. I agree that is the procedure and the process. I have no further disagreement with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, if that's your plan to do that, I will introduce a whole new amendment myself to make sure that we move forward, because I feel that the CBA is important. The work that has been put in by the residents, I'm not going to play like the work is just irrelevant. I think it's very important what they have put in. And we talk about projects after project inside the city where we're not seeing people, Gary residents working on these projects. And this is a chance where on certain projects that we get to play a part inside this. And when I say we, I mean citizen. This is a citizen-driven ordinance here that's taking place here. And I want to make sure that the citizens have a fair shot.
Mr. Brewer, let me ask this question. That's you. All you're doing is regurgitating what they're saying. Who do you think I'm talking about appointing? People from California, Alabama,
But Mr. Lake,
Mississippi?
but the thing that it is though, those people didn't create this.
I
People
understand.
dealing with those people that created, but this is a group that sat down and planned and put this together. So I'm not going to play like the hard work they put into it.
No. I've never used the word irrelevant. That is your term. I didn't say they were irrelevant.
Thumbs up to be.
No, we started out talking about a 501c4. You guys have just simply forgotten that it goes to truth and veracity. So that's going down. That's going down the pike. I asked for a 1024. I wasted a bunch of time on that. I've never gotten that. So I'm not saying anything is irrelevant. I don't know and have the same knowledge of the people that you're talking about pointing. You saying 2 years seems to me what you're talking about is quantity. I'm talking about the quality. In other words, are we getting the best 6 of the 16? I don't know, because you're saying they don't have to submit certain things. Or they don't have to submit. That's okay. I'm sorry. I'm taking up time.
Okay.
I apologize.
All right, everybody. I do plan to take this forward on third and final. Mr. Lay has stated what his point is. I will also be introducing a whole separate amendment to this because I do feel like the CBA is very important to move forward with. I think we have taken in consideration of what the mayor wants to make sure the mayor has input, what Mr. Lay wants, and I think we have done a good job of putting this together to give us a starting point that we all can kind of agree with and move forward. And I'm pretty sure in the future, as things change, we're going to have to make additional amendments. I'm not saying this is perfect now, but I think we're in a lot better place at this point here moving forward. But I look forward to seeing everyone September 1st at 6 p.m. for the council meeting via Zoom. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.